Hello and welcome to the channel. So behind me here is a Japanese cherry tree, or at least what's left of one. It used to be a really nice decorative tree, but around this time last year in the springtime, just after the leaves started to grow in, we got hit with a really crazy snowstorm. And all that wet, heavy snow, it stuck to all those leaves and ended up pulling the branches down, and they almost all broke. So after I went ahead and cut off all the broken branches, there really wasn't much left. I was hoping the tree would survive, but it didn't. And recently I noticed that carpenter ants are starting to make a home in this tree. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it down, and hopefully I can salvage at least the wood and maybe slab some lumber and make a coffee table or something along those lines. So that's the job I'm working on today. So hopefully you can see some of those carpenter ants running around. They seem to be nesting up here on the top. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the top of the tree off and see what the wood looks like. So today I'm going to be using this Kobalt 80V electric chainsaw. This is a pretty strong chainsaw, but I have a smaller 2.5 amp hour battery in here. This battery doesn't really produce a whole lot of power, and when I have the chain completely buried in wood, it has a tendency to cut off the chainsaw. So as a backup, I also have my 5 amp hour battery in case this 2.5 amp hour battery isn't quite up to the challenge. I like to start with this one though because it's a lot lighter. Now, you probably noticed it did cut off a couple of times, but if you just let it cut and try not to push it and make sure the bar doesn't get pinched, it works pretty well. I guess the birds are trying to send me a message. Okay, the log is secured, and I'm going to attempt to debark it with the bark spud. I've never debarked cherry wood before, so we'll see how this goes. So what I've done here, I've just made a cut down the center of the log, and now I'm using that opening to kind of peel off the bark to get underneath it like this. And it's working pretty well. Alright, so I got the log pretty well debarked now. I did manage to bend my bark spud. This is just a light duty bark spud. The same manufacturer also makes a heavy duty one. So I guess I need to upgrade. Of course, I've peeled an awful lot of Douglas fir and cedar logs and never had an issue. So this cherry tree bark is really tough and really thick. So anyway, I'm about out of daylight, so I'm going to have to continue on tomorrow. Okay, so I think I have a good plan for this log here. Now it's a bit longer than it needs to be for a coffee table or a bench, so I'm planning to cut it a little bit short here. Now I was thinking with this shape here, it might make for a good end table or a couple of end tables. So I'm going to go ahead and cut a couple of 3-inch slices before I start slabbing the log. But before I do that, I need to make sure that this end piece is nice and level. This was just cut by freehand when I was out in the yard there. So I'm going to be using the beam machine and a little piece of a 2x4 here to hopefully keep the chainsaw nice and straight in order to cut through this log at a 90-degree angle. Now, this bar is not quite long enough to get all the way through, so I'll probably cut as much as I can with the beam machine and then remove the beam machine and do the rest by hand. So we're going to see how it turns out. Well, besides getting a face full of sawdust, that worked out pretty well. Not too bad. There's a little bit of a lip right here, but I think that can be cleaned up pretty easily. Otherwise, that was a nice straight and pretty smooth cut as well. Okay, so we have our first end table, or whatever it's going to be. Okay, so it's the next day and I'm going to try to finish up this project here. Now, I was originally planning to use that Kobalt 80V cordless chainsaw to slab up this log here, but I was having some problems with that chainsaw yesterday. I was seeing smoke coming off the bar, and as I looked into it, it turns out that the oiler's not working. So I went ahead and got the Alaska mill on my MS261 Stihl chainsaw. This chainsaw always works, so we're going to go ahead and try to finish up this slabbing job. Now, one thing I almost forgot to mention is that I've changed my setup slightly since the last video I posted. In that video, I was using the sides of these stands here to place it underneath the log to help prevent it from rolling. Now, I've since switched out to these little homemade wedges. This is just a 2x4 that I've cut at a 45-degree angle. This is a lot smaller in height, which means that it's less likely to interfere with my Alaska mill when I get down to cutting at the bottom of the log. Okay, so let's take a look at the wood and see what we got. And I got a little bit of a bump here. I think this is where I stopped the chainsaw to put my wedges in place. But otherwise, I think I'm really liking this grain pattern. Okay, so I want to make my primary slab about 3 inches thick. And I also want it to be centered around the center of the log. So if I measured out 3 inches around the center point here, I have about 1 inch extra on top. So my next cut is going to be cut at 1 inch deep from the top. So I'll get rid of that 1 inch, and that slab will just be a board or something along those lines. And the 3 inch primary slab will be something a little more substantial, like a table or a bench. Okay, so this is the very first piece that I cut off on the end of the trunk there. This is not going to be used in the building process, but I'll probably keep it around just so I can test out the different stains and sealants before I apply it to the rest of the wood. But anyway, I've sprayed this down with water just so you can see the end grain. So if you can compare to this one, it should look something more like this whenever I've finished the wood and oiled it or stained it and sealed it. Okay, so here's what we ended up with. I have the 2 end pieces here. These are about 3 inches thick. Then I have this 1 inch board here. This will probably be a shelving board or something along those lines. And this was the top piece. Then I have a 3 inch slab. And then the bottom piece is also about 3 inches thick. Now I was initially planning to make some sort of a table or something like that. But I think these 3 pieces here are going to make for a really good bench. Although I haven't quite made up my mind. Now these 3 inch sections here, these are going to take about 3 years to dry. So if you want to see the final product, I guess you'll have to come back in about 3 years. So that's about it. I need to seal up the ends and find a place to store them to air dry. And we'll see you next time.